As an opening, it has to be noted that what Frithjof Schuon would convey is metaphysic. In his own words, metaphysic operated by intellect, metaphysic in the most precise meaning of the word, and cannot by any means be described as philosophical, to distinguish it from ordinary knowledge obtained by reasoning. Frithjof Schuon was born in Basel, Switzerland in 1907. From an early age, he was fond of studying Plato's philosophy and the works of Goethe. Furthermore, he also enjoyed reading Bhagavad Gita and Veda, which were in his father's private library. At the age of 17, Schuon had frequently corresponded with René Guénon, a Muslim perennialist who at that time lived in Cairo. Schuon spent his life on spiritual odyssey, and he himself was also in love with Eastern metaphysics. While he was in Paris working as a designer, he also took time to learn Arabic in a mosque. He also began to focus on studying metaphysics and Eastern mystical traditions. Schuon got married to an artist named Catherine Schuon, who was also passionate about metaphysics. Schuon spent all of his life on spiritual odyssey. He went to Algeria in 1932 and visited one of the Sufi orders led by Sheikh Al-Alawi. He also visited Morocco. In 1938, he went to India and made time to visit René Guénon, who by that time was already living in Cairo. According to Stoddard, Schuon had been reading Guénon's work since he was 17 years old. It is undeniable that Schuon himself was quite influenced by Guénon's writings. In 1959 and 1963, Schuon went to America. There in South Dakota and Montana, Schuon had an opportunity to see firsthand the life of the Indians, to study about their spiritual life. Like Guénon, Schuon is reported to have converted to Islam and is known as Isa Nuruddin Ahmad Ash-Shadhili At-Tarqui Al-Alawi Al-Maryami. It is reported that like René Guénon, at the hands of the Sheikh of Shadhiliya, Sheikh Al-Alawi, and Schuon was given the name Isa Nuruddin Ahmad. He then founded a Sufi order named Al-Maryamiyya. Schuon died in 1998 at the age of 91 years. Frithjof Schuon's works in fact occupy a special place in a very broad area concerning metaphysics and religion. His authoritative tones of speech, clear expression, and alchemy change the human language in proclaiming the deepest truth. Schuon's view is a view that concerns universal metaphysic concerning religio perennis or religio codis, as he himself calls it, which has been revealed to humans through various heavenly traditions. Schuon combines his incomparable metaphysical insights with his broad and deep knowledge of various religions in doctrinal, ethical, and aesthetic aspects. He delves into the niches of different traditions. In addition, Schuon philosophically criticizes modern civilization and its mischief. He has played an important role in promoting traditionalism and in staunchly opposing modernism. One of the critics of the epistemology of modern science comes from a school calling themselves traditionalists or perennialists. Perennialists are a school who believe that the current crisis is the result of the disconnection of Western civilization with primordial tradition. The primordial tradition is eternal philosophy, Sophia perennis, or eternal religion, Religio perennis, which is passed on from generation to generation as long as human beings exist. These perennialists seek to place modern science within a metaphysical framework and compare it with pre-modern scientific traditions. Frithjof Schuon is of the view that the philosophical foundation of modern knowledge cannot be justified. Viewed from the point of view of the subject of knowledge, modern philosophy of science has subverted the realm of intellect and revelation with reason and experiment. Meanwhile, as an object of knowledge, the foundation of Western science has substituted substance with matter, either through the rejection of the universal principles or reducing them to a kind of pseudo-absolute, so that all transcendent things are nothing left. In general, according to perennialists, modern philosophy is a codification of thoughts that has many weaknesses. For some, the essence of philosophy is certainty. For modern people, the essence of philosophy is doubt, by which philosophy is considered as an attempt to think without premises. They do not realize that even that assumption is in fact a premise in itself. According to Schuon, this is a classic contradiction that exists in the view of everything is relative. According to Schuon, this is a modern problem. The way out of this problem is definitely not by continuing to glorify the doubt. On the contrary, to return to the source of certainty that is able to transcend mental mechanism is the only way out of the problem. This source of certainty is called pure intellect, pure intelligence, or pure reason. It is not impossible to try to return the word philosophy to its original meaning. Philosophy, the root meaning of which is love of wisdom, is the science of all fundamental principles. The science works using intuition to taste or feel and not solely rely on reason to infer. Schuon understands intellect as did Mr. Eckhart. There is something in the soul that has uncreated and uncreatable. If the whole soul were this, it would be uncreated and uncreatable. And this is the intellect. Pure intelligence not only transcends philosophical reasoning but also goes beyond the theological views. For Schuon, intuitive intelligence comes from God and participates directly in divine knowledge. Thus, according to him, metaphysic is absolute. However, it seems that Schuon wants to avoid Aristotelian metaphysic because there is a clear distinction between Aristotle and Plato. The former is exoteric representation, whereas the latter is esoteric. Therefore, Bonaventura calls Aristotelian science and Platonism wisdom. What distinguishes Schuon's metaphysical view from the view of modern philosophy is that his is symbolic and descriptive, in the sense that it uses rational means as symbols to translate or explain knowledge that has a greater level than any knowledge based on the senses. Modern philosophy uses reason, rational reasoning, to solve a doubt, which actually proves that it starts from a doubt that is being solved. Meanwhile, for Schuon, a metaphysical formulation is essentially based on something clear and intellectually certain. Schuon insists that true knowledge is knowledge that leads humans to know the absolute or the real. Schuon describes knowledge according to Plato and St. Augustine. In the intellect, the subject is the object, that is being, and when the object is the subject, it is knowing, which will bring absolute certainty. However, here Schuon doesn't intend to negate knowledge stemming from perception. He divides knowledge into three categories based on the subject and the object of knowledge. First, the knowledge of sensory phenomena, the subject of which is certain sensory faculties or a combination of these faculties. It seems quite important to recall that there is no empiricism in metaphysics. In Schuon's view, principal knowledge cannot come from experience, although experience, scientific or other, can sometimes be the causes of intuitions of the intellect. Second, the knowledge of physical principles or cosmic categories, the subject of which is the rational faculty. The important characteristic of the rationalists is critical and retrospective, but not prospective. Their infatuation with culture and excessive progress attest to their introspectivity. Indeed, critical understanding is a virtue that should be not abandoned, but that is not enough. For Schuon, it still requires a spiritual context to justify it and give it the right proportions. Third, the knowledge of metaphysical principles, the subject of which is pure intellect and intellectual intuition or intellection, and not discursive stuff. Knowledge, the subject of which is not the intellect, cannot be categorized as metaphysic. Intellectual knowledge is at higher level because it comes from God, like metaphysical knowledge, and does not come from humans. Intellectual intuition is direct and active participation in divine knowledge and not indirect and passive. In other words, with respect to intellectual intuition, knowledge is not possessed by the individual as an ordinary individual, but as an individual insofar as in its deepest essence, he or she is not different from his or her divine principle. Therefore, metaphysical certainty is absolute, because of the identity between the knower and the known in the intellect. One cannot reach reality solely through observing phenomena, but through God in us, which enables human to perceive it. Schuon views God as the ultimate reality that is absolute and remains absolute, viz. He is infinite. Quote, his absoluteness is neither added nor subtracted, neither multiplied nor divided. He therefore is himself from the very beginning. Whereas in his infinity, he is by no means limited by any factors and has no final limit in any respect. He is potentiality or mere possibility, and ipso facto is the possibility of all things. Thus he is the reality. Without this possibility of all things, there is neither creator nor created, neither maya nor samsara. The infinite, so to speak, is the intrinsic dimension of the fulfillment of the absolute. To speak of the absolute is also to speak of the infinite. The former cannot exist without the latter. Symbolically, the relationship between the two can be described. In the dimension of space, the absolute is a point, while the infinite expansion. In the dimension of time, the absolute is moment, while the infinite duration. In the material order, the absolute is the ether, the primordial substance, the omnipresent basis, and the infinite is the infinite series of possible substances. On the planes of form, the absolute is the sphere, the simple and primordial form, and the infinite is the possible forms. Finally, on a numerical level, the absolute is the possible sequence of numbers, quantities, or totalities. The difference between the absolute and the infinite expresses two fundamental aspects of reality, that is, essential and potential. Both are also the highest prefigurations of the masculine-feminine pole, which from the second aspect, the infinite, is another form of the possibility of all things, the emergence of the universal emanation, both the divine and the cosmic Maya. Within the framework of Schuon's metaphysics, intellect is the most significant portion as the center of human being located in the heart. Schuon describes the significance of the intellect as the only form of qualification of morality. In other words, the intellectual portion must be proportional to the moral portion. Otherwise, spiritually, the intellect doesn't work. The relationship between intellect and spirituality is like the relationship between center and periphery. It is the principle to support his esoteric-exoteric dialectic in which Schuon puts forward the transcendent unity of religion, which we'll talk about someday. See you soon.